Okay, it's 12 o'clock. Welcome, everybody. We're really glad to have you here, and we're really glad to have Dr. Nazish Sayed with us, who will be helping all of us here learn about medicine and research in medicine. He's a research scientist and doctor at Stanford. So thank you very much, doctor, for joining us. So please take it away. Thank
Assalamu alaikum, everyone. No, thank you, Azhar, for inviting me to give a talk. I'll give my introduction. I have been at Stanford, so if you guys have any questions, you can interrupt me anytime, or if you want to wait till the end. Let me just share my screen. Um, Please let me know if you do see them.
you. Yes, we can
Did
see
you?
it now.
All right. Okay, good. So as I said, thanks for the invitation again. My name is Nazish Sayed. I am a physician scientist at Stanford University School of Medicine at the Cardiovascular Institute. I did my postdoctoral fellowship there and then continued to do my faculty position. Uh, I'm going to go with how the slides were prepared, and then I can try to answer them each and every slide, kind of taking you as I did my academic career, as I followed the path for it. So it kind of makes you see what are the difficulties and what are the pros and the cons of going through this entire thing. So again, as I said, feel free to ask me. I think it would be much better if we made it more interactive. Just to give you a little bit of idea, I did my MD and my residency back from where I come from. I come from India, Mumbai, where I did my medical school in the University of Mumbai. I did my residency at a memorial hospital in Mumbai itself. But I wanted to continue my training not just in clinical medicine, but I also wanted to continue my training in understanding what this clinical medicine is. How do we get to clinical medicine? And I got an opportunity to kind of come and do my graduate school, that is a PhD at New Jersey Medical School. That's like my second home, where I I could say now I'm from New Jersey because it's been a long time since I've been in the United States. So I came home. I came to Rutgers, did my graduate school. I was very interested because my residency was in cardiology. I was very interested to understand more about molecular medicine in the cardiovascular field. Uh, right after my graduate school, I got my fellowship at Stanford. So that was another move from the east, from one coast, from one country to the another country, from one coast to the other coast. And I did my postdoctoral fellowship year at Stanford, again in the Cardiovascular Institute. It's been almost 10 years since I came to the Bay Area, did my fellowship here. For a couple of years, I moved to Houston to finish my fellowship as my former boss was moving there. But then I moved from Houston back here as a full faculty here in the Cardiovascular Institute. So this has been quite a bit of journey here. A lot of years going in, and I think we can kind of uh, delve into these questions which Brother Azhar has prepared, and we can kind of dig into it and see, is this journey really worth it? Is it, what are the good things involved in it? What are the struggles which are there? How much money you can make? How much name you can make for yourself? That's what we all kind of, trying to struggle and get to our career endpoint. So with that, let me go right into the questions. uh, Education level, right? So, how is education level needed to be a physician scientist? So, I mean, I think this is a kind of a no-brainer because the colleagues who came and presented before me were from the medical background. They were either MDs or from the nursing profession or from a pharmacy background. All of these professions require you to have not only a degree but advanced degree. So of course we do need a college graduation. We do need a post graduation for. So if you want to really go for an MD, uh, then you do need to go through your pre-med, right, and undergrad. you guys all know about it, then go right into give you a MCAT score, go right into med school. But then, we finish our MD, and we always think that there's only one path for us to go is clinical medicine. And I kind of disagree with this, because once you finish your MD, of course, you have your clinical license, you have your residencies to finish. But MDs have two parts. One is finishing your degree, which is your MD, and the other one is to finish your residency, where you get your license to practice medicine. So there are two different aspects. Your MD will still remain with you, your degree, even if you decide not to pursue with a residency and obtain your license. And your degree, MD, can lead you to other careers, other paths, which are as exciting in the medical field as a clinical practice. So of course, and or you could do both. For me personally, I decided to do my MD PhD because I really wanted to see how I can not only have the clinical knowledge, where I can look at, understand the clinical aspects of cardiovascular field, but also understand how we can conduct research at a molecular level to understand how the clinical practice is done. Most of the I've been an MD, so most of the drugs which we prescribe are discovered somewhere else, which is in a lab, which then undergo all kinds of aspects where they get tested, they get underwent clinical trials, and then they go into um, clinics where they can actually run clinical trials on humans. So your MD can then lead to a lot of degrees. You can think about pursuing a PhD with it, an MD PhD. So of course, education level is a must in this thing. Uh, Pursuing an advanced degree, even if you just stick with your MD, you need to think about doing fellowships where you can super specialize in a field. I did my fellowship in cardiology because I really wanted to go dig deeper into the cardiovascular field. And then as you think doing more, you can then apply for an academic position, like I have done. You can affiliate yourself with a university like Stanford or UCSF in the Bay Area, or you could go to Harvard and Yale, other all of these institutes. Or you can think about a pharmaceutical job. Remember, MDs are as much needed in a pharmaceutical job as PhDs, because the job of a pharmaceutical company is to push out a drug which needs to be tested on human beings as clinical trials. So this is different aspects of what an MD PhD. But let me tell you what MD PhD would do is that, one, it gives you an aspect of both the sides of medicine, the research side and the clinical side. There are only about 2% of all doctors who are MD PhDs. A lot of universities, for a career point of view, want people to apply for their MST program. This is called the Medical Training Science MSTP program, because they want people to come in. They can do a 7-year program where can they do 4 years of medical school and 3 years of graduate school, combine them together to get an MD PhD. To make it more exciting, uh, they even offer you full scholarship to do your MD PhDs. In addition, will pay a stipend for you to cover your living expenses to do an MD PhD. Now, let me tell you, it's extremely competitive to get into an MD PhD program, and you have to kind of already be in that frame of mind to get into an MD PhD program, where you can affiliate yourself with an academic institute. They usually prefer MD PhDs because then you can affiliate with the top-notch university, a medical center, uh, to kind of push your career forward with this thing. And if you guys have any questions about the MD PhD program, for example, Stanford has an MSTP program where they are always looking for college graduates who are really interested to pursue both these degrees. It's a 7-year program. It's a commitment, but it is one of the best in the U.S. or even in the world. So moving forward, does university or college reputation matter? Yes, it does matter, because not because it is Harvard or Stanford or it is any of these big institutes, because get mentored and trained by experts who are in that institute. Remember, all these big institutes, Harvard Medical School, Stanford Medical School, they try to recruit individuals who uh, are really top of the line in their respective fields, cardiology, neurology. So it does matter if you could get into a good university or a good program. It is because you will get hands-on experience with mentors who are well trained in this field, who are well recognized in the entire country. So these questions, it does matter, but it really eventually it doesn't matter which university you do, because if you can excel in whichever respective university, the good thing in the United States is that you will get recognized even if you're coming from a smaller university. However, as I said, the main thing is to look for a good top of the line mentor to be trained from. Yes. Does this profession require a certain aptitude? I would say absolutely. You need to be in that frame of mind to think about going into a physician scientist, because it is a long program. You definitely need that discipline, that uh, mental commitment to go into this program. The rewards are amazing because you think about, you will be in the top 2-3% of physicians who do both the dual degrees. You get a double doctorate because you do an MD and you do a PhD. So it is kind of uh, a narrow path, but you do need that mental frame of mind. You do need that commitment to finish this. Usually, the MD PhD program is divided into two slots. You will first come in and do 2 years of your medical classroom, where you will be learning more knowledge based information, which is from the books, classrooms, labs, as you do it in college. Then you're going to take a 3-year break right after 2 years of medical school, where you will get into a lab which you have kind of picked to continue your PhD program. In the first 2 years, you can think about which lab, which field you want to continue doing. It gives you a little bit early start because you can already think about that. Hey, I want to go into neurosciences, I want to go into cardiology, I want to go into vascular field. It kind of gives you a little bit of head start. You pick a lab. Usually these labs are well established labs. They have a research program running, so you don't need to come and try to think about discovering all the way from scratch. You do 3 years of your PhD right in there. Again, this is no classroom because you already did your classroom in your medical school in 2 years. In these 3 years, you will be studying lab experiments, trying to run and publish papers. Remember, publications are key because these publications are eventually picked up by pharmaceutical companies who are going to think about getting a drug out, which are then going to come in contact with the hospital when they have a drug in a clinical trial, because they need to recruit patients from those hospitals. So you could see how all of the three different aspects are connected to kind of lead forward into it. So yes, you do need that, but I can bet 99% of the people coming in this field already know that this is what the discipline is needed to continue into the medical field. Now, the next question is, what sort of interests should a high school student be thinking about, as in order to succeed? I think the most important thing, and again, I'm sure everyone has answered this in the panel, is you're really interested and you're passionate about the field. Now, medical field itself, of course, you need to be really interested, that I want to be a people person, I want to take care of patients, I really want. But go into a physician scientist field, an MSTP program, you need to also be very inquisitive in nature. You should always be just not thinking about that. If I have a patient coming in my clinic, and if I'm just going to prescribe a generic drug without thinking about what I can do for this long term plan, you need to be inquisitive to think about a PhD along with your MD. So, for that, you need to dig in and you need to be inquisitive right at this high school level, where you can try to pick up questions that why does this happen? How does this happen? And what can I do to figure out why it happens? I mean, I can give you an example right here. In my clinics, I get a lot of patients who have dilated cardiomyopathy. So this is a kind of a heart failure where the heart is not able to pump enough blood to reach the different parts of the body. But you know, that's usually the line of treatment is to, okay, do some investigations, and then either put him on one drug or try to do some procedure, and usually send the patient back. But then our interest not only ends with the clinic, but also take it into my own lab and take these patient samples, bring the patient in the lab and try to figure out what can I understand that why it happens. A lot of these cardiac diseases are because of mutation, because of inherited diseases passed down from generation to generation. And then that is something that we are really interested, is why does it happen, to try to understand. And this requires a lot of interest in the field, a lot of inquisitive nature, a lot of patience, a lot of a drive to fulfill this. Because once I do understand why something is wrong with my patient, I can go back into the clinic and try to then address that maybe the next generation who has this would be able to get a lead with it. All right. Mo- all right. So moving to the next question, which I think is a loaded question, that how much money, and that's a very important question because we all got to live, right? We just cannot live on having a passion for something or interest to do something. We all got to find a way where we can have basic needs. So how much money can a new college graduate expect to earn in this profession? What about someone with 10 or 20 years of experience? And when do folks in the field retire? So I'm going to try to answer it as, it's a loaded question, so I'm going to go easy on it. So, as any new college graduate, you're coming in the field of medicine, and if you are going into med school, coming out to do your residency, you're going to make a stipend. So you're not going to make a lot of money because you're still in the training program, you're still in residency, you still have to go and finish off your residence to make a license. The same thing with the PhD or MD PhD is that once you come out of college, you are still in training because a post graduation degree is needed, because fellowship will take you into that academic career which you're thinking about, or this long term thing you're thinking about. So, right out of school, right out of your MD degree, or even after your residency or your PhD program, for 3 years, you do need to be into your fellowship, which will not get you enough money. Um, where you can think about going and buying a Ferrari for yourself. That's not going to happen in the first 3 years. Um, so expect some kind of time right after your college degree in your profession, after your fellowships, to have money, but not something where you can really think about doing. So give yourself some time on it, where you have 3 years to build something. Now, what about someone with 10 or 20 years of experience? So absolutely, you're going to make quite a bit of money. Again, I'm going to try to divide it in three ways because an MD PhD has three different places where he can think about doing it. One is an academic career. So once you finish your fellowship, and if you do get into a faculty position in a top-notch school, you will certainly be making a good amount of money. uh, Faculty at Stanford are well taken care of because once a big institute like Stanford or Harvard or Yale uh, commits to a faculty position, an MD, PhD, they want to retain that faculty because they have invested a lot of time and infrastructure for a lab and a clinic into that individual who has an MD, PhD. So they will be yearning to retain that faculty, help the faculty go from an assistant to an associate to a full professor. And as you go through this tenured position from an assistant to full professor, your salary is exponentially going to increase so that they can retain you and keep it uh, within Stanford. There's always this big struggle of a big institute coming and picking you up and taking because you've published well or you have been able to get a lot of extramural support from the National Institute of Health. Now, pharmaceutical, you right out of your fellowship, you've done well. And if a pharmaceutical company wants to pick you up as a scientist, you certainly are going to make a real good amount of money. That I can tell you, you don't even need to wait 10 years for that. In a couple of years, you can be in a good scientist position. Companies like Merck in South San Francisco or Genentech, Even Google have started two companies. They will definitely be interested to have an MD, PhD on their roster, because not only you bring the clinical experience, but you also bring the drug experience, the molecular medicine experience, where they will be able to leverage that to push their own products out into the field. So you're going to make decent amount of money. And then the last is the MD. I'm not going to talk about it because I'm pretty sure the panel before me has already spoke about it. Again, all depends on which field you want to go in: surgery, medicine, uh, radiology. Every aspect has different money levels, but as you go with experience, you're going to make, surely you're going to have more financial freedom and more money coming in. Now, when do folks retire? There is no retirement requirement that you need to retire at certain age. In my field, I can tell you, as an MD, PhD, there is no age. As long as I can keep my commitment of conducting research, bringing in publications, new discoveries, new patents, and getting funding from the United States National Institute of Health or Department of Defense, there is no age for requirement. I have one of my mentors who's 82, and he is still one of the biggest people in Stanford who are working. So there is no, as I said, because it's driven with interest and with passion, there is no certain age for retirement. But you will be so fine. And if you, once you're tenured, let's give you an example that, let's say by the age of 65 you do want to retire. Once you are tenured, you have that luxury of toning down your clinic and your lab, and then go into a much easier lifestyle of just teaching medical students or graduate students, where you can have a much toned retired life as well, but once in a while you go teach. There will be a professional stipend attached with this because you are tenured with that institute. And then once you fully retire, they can still give you an alumni status, which allows you to get some kind of base salary. So this is one of the perks for this field, is that there's no age to retire, but if you get tenured and you retire, there is something attached to it. So in the pharmaceutical company, usually, unfortunately, age do play an important role because they want to bring in young blood, where who will be able to kind of push new ideas into the field. So there is kind of an aging factor which comes in into the field. All right. To keep up with time, let me get into the next question. Yes. What is the work-life balance? Now, I mean, I always say, right? I mean, I was born in India. I grew up in India. My dad had a much better work-life balance because it was India. They have a much better work-life balance than what we have in the United States. So as I write in this, as in any competitive field, hard work pays, and we are required to be competing this rat race as we go along. So in the field of physician scientist, medical research, medical any medical field, I would say, you need to work much more than your 35 to 40 hours a week. It's driven by uh, interest, passion. You need to be competing. Remember, the thing is, if I am just trying to discover a drug for a heart failure patient, might be another lab in UCLA or Berkeley who might be working on that same drug. And in unfortunately in our field, whoever publishes first gets the patent, gets that recognition of publishing first. Same thing happens. I'm guessing I'm not going to talk about the clinical aspect, but yes, you are working longer because you do want a clientele. You do want the hospital for who you're working to keep that patient balance coming in. But in my field of academic career, where I have both a clinical and a research field, I want to make sure that I am much more on top of my work. So it does end up that you're not going to work 40 hours a week. Uh, I can't put a number to it because we work 7 days a week and you need to kind of keep up with this. As I said, the whole goal is that we are trying to get something discovered. discovery waits for no one, and especially the people who are going to take it easy. Discovery doesn't work that way. You need to discover something, you need to be on top. There is a saying which goes with this, that uh, innovation comes to people who are well prepared and hardworking. So you need to be well prepared, you need to be on top of it. So if you think about only a 35 or 40 hours a week, it will be difficult for you to be in MD PhD program. You need to be much more competitive. I don't know if this is the last slide. No, okay. Are jobs for this professions isolated for a certain region in the country? Not at all. This is not like you think about the Bay Area where all the IT companies are there. No, sky's the limit here. But do remember, academic institutes are limited when in certain geographical areas. I mean, for example, in the Bay Area, we got two top institutes, Stanford and UCSF, when it comes to medical research. Berkeley, too, of course, in the affiliation, and UC Davis, which comes in. So there is no limitation where you need to be in a certain area to be uh, getting a job. I can tell you that before Stanford reached out, I had an offer from Ohio State University. So it's all over the US where you do have a chance to move out, not just in the United States. There are people who are getting recruited in the United Kingdom, Australia, even the Middle East, for example, Saudi Arabia and Qatar. They do have a lot of these medical schools where they are looking for academic faculty who has a clinical background and a PhD background. So there is no limitation. It just depends on where you want to be, which area you want to do it in, and how competitive you are to get into those big institutes or competitive institutes to get in. I think this is a good question. Where is the industry heading? I mean, I can tell you, as long as we know, this field has never died nor ever will, because we are always discovering new medicine, new research, new technology, new tools to answer these medical questions. There is only going to be innovation. I can give you an example that my field, I do more computational work in my research now than I have ever have, because the field is changing. I now can now uh, get my patient who has a heart disease in the clinic, and I can look at his entire genome using computational biology and predict what him or his next generation could be. So the field is ever changing. It will never die. We will incorporate more and more technologies which come in. It could be engineering, because we do engineer stuff, implants, devices which go in the body, computational science, because we are looking at the genome, the genes, mathematically. So one thing you can be rest assured, if you are trying to catch up with the field provides you with the tool to catch up with the field, because uh, it's ever living. It will remain new. There is always going to be people who have illness and diseases. And then, yes, what sort of work environment is in this profession? If you can reach into your academic certain aspect, of course, there is a hierarchy in this field. I was a PhD student, I was an MD student. You have to look at your mentor, learn from it. The environment is always very creative, cutthroat. Let me tell you, yes, you need to be on top of your game, because, as I said, I have trying to discover something, but there is another lab maybe in Berkeley trying to do the same thing. I need to get this patients to my clinical trial, but there might be a trial in UCLA who's trying to recruit these same patients for their clinical trial. So, once you have finished with your training and you have your own lab, you can say that you are your own boss. I have my own lab. I can decide I do not want to go and I want to work from home today. I have my fellows who might be working, or gives you the flexibility that I want to start my work today at 11 o'clock. But as I said, if you start at 11, you might be working harder till late at the night. So you are your own boss. You drive the projects you want to drive. Like, I can decide tomorrow that I want to work not just on heart, but but I want to start working on the brain as well because the brain can control the heart. So this field gives you that creativity, this unique idea that you can do what you want to do. But there's a catch because you do at the end need to hit your certain milestones so that you can move up the field from an assistant professor to an associate professor to a full professor in this school of medicine. So you have to remember that you need to still report something. As long as you're able to hit your discovery milestones, you're good to go. And with that, I think I'll thank you. I think this is perfect 12:30. If you guys have any questions, this would be the time. Let me just unshare my slides.
Yes, thank you very much, Dr. Nazish. This was very helpful. We have a bunch of questions.
Sure.
I guess one of the questions was in terms of education. So after 4 years of bachelor's, you go to medical school for 4 years, then residency, and then you do PhD, or
No,
like how many years does this add to your education?
that's a really good question. So first thing, yes, you do 4 years of pre med. You go right. So if you decide at that time that this is what I really want to do, I want to be affiliated with an academic institute, you can very well prepare in your pre-med 4 years that I want to pursue an MD PhD program. A lot of institutes, I can tell you, with Stanford provides the 7-year program where you can finish right out of pre-medical school, let's say right at 4 years. You can go into this program and you will come out in 7 years as an MD PhD. Then you continue with your 3 years of residency, and you are good to go as an academic faculty. In case if you don't want to, you can go fully into clinical practice as well, because there is always this added advantage of having a PhD degree to bring in to get a job in a much better clinical, like Kaiser or something, if you want to work on. So you do have this option. Let me tell you this as well. Sometimes your high school might be having this kind of a program deal with medical school where you can then decide to do this 7-year program right into your 2 years of your pre-med, because you have this deal with your high school. Extraordinary students are pushed through where they can finish everything within the total span of 9 years right out of high school. It's limited. There are not many schools, high schools, that do it, but they do exist.
Okay, thank you for that. And then we had one more question. So with respect to, for instance, the vaccine for COVID-19, is that something that MD PhDs came up with, or is that something like MD PhDs would come up with, or is that something like a pharmacist or an MD? Like, how does that work?
So the COVID vaccine, I mean, it's a deep question. The vaccine, the mRNA vaccine, was into the works in a lot of labs from before. So all PhDs or MD PhDs were working on an mRNA vaccine, not for COVID specifically, for illnesses which are unlimited. So we already had a lot of work, I would say decades of work going on an mRNA vaccine, right? When you think of a COVID vaccine, it's an mRNA vaccine. But when COVID hit, the discovery was made in a lab that we can leverage that mRNA vaccine for COVID. It didn't come out in a clinic. It came out in a lab where people who had these expertise of a PhD or an MD PhD. And then once that preclinical trials were run on animal models or in a dish with cells, they were pushed into the clinic where again an MD PhD could be running that entire clinical trial. Because remember, you still have your MD degree, which will allow you to do your license. You can practice, you can do what you want to do. But that MD PhD gives you this added advantage of attaching yourself with an academic institute.
So when you say lab, what do you mean? You mean like a Pfizer or Moderna clinic, or like what is a lab exactly?
So I can tell you, like my lab in Stanford, and this could help you relate. My lab in Stanford is not big as Pfizer, but it has all the tools and technologies and the resources which are needed to run a few projects on cardiovascular diseases. It has all of this aspect. Of course, pharmaceutical companies are loaded with a lot of money, which is helping them make more money on drugs. we run thinking about what we can do as discovery, we can take it into the clinic. Of course, we do file patents on our own, which we can then sell to pharmaceutical company. So you can say, yes, it is like a lab in Pfizer, uh, where you are running your research experiments in a miniature size. We cannot compete with big money pharmaceuticals.
Okay, thank you. And we have another question from Hussein. Hussein, go ahead, please.
Sure, thank you. I have two questions actually. One is, do you possibly have an email address if we wanted to like ask a question like afterward? Maybe you can type in the chat. Is that possible?
Sure, I can let Brother Azhar pass it on to you guys right out of the meeting.
Sure.
Happy to.
Thank you. And I have one other question. So, like, what is your current schedule? Like, is it like you spend a couple days in the clinic and the other days in your lab? Like, what is the breakdown of that?
Right. So, as you get more seniority into your field, I mean, this is usually, which is very traditional. You go less and less into the clinic because you want to spend more and more time in your lab. And when I say lab, maybe in the office, because you're really trying to establish a really good, robust research program. So initially, and I can tell you, I don't go in the clinic anymore because I don't want to, and I don't need to, because I have been able to establish a fully funded lab in Stanford where I don't need to go into the clinic. And I can tell you, I'm enjoying it because I get to spend more time with discovery. But I can give you an example of one of my colleagues. He spends 1 week of a month in the clinic and the remaining 3 weeks of his time in his lab, um, trying to figure out what experiments need to be done and what kind of research program. And let me tell you, this is not just that we are trying to figure out experiments and what we need to do, but we also writing competitive grants to the Department of Defense or the National Institutes of Health. That's the major bulk of our time, is to try to compete and get additional money, millions of dollars, which can be put into it. So yes, you do, but as you go into seniority, you will have less time in the clinic because you have now 20 people in your lab who you need to be associated. Remember, a big aspect of our is mentorship. We need to mentor our fellows who can eventually become academic faculty. So that's all part of this whole curriculum which comes along.
Gotcha. I have one follow up. So then, if you don't go in the clinic, do there for your like, let's say you want to get samples for your lab, do people in your lab go in the clinic and do stuff?
Right. So this is where we need I mean, Stanford provides that unique opportunity because we have collaborations with the clinical colleagues who have no labs. They are just MDs, and their job is to just treat the patients. They are not really interested in the samples, what investigations need to be done. So what we do is then we collaborate with them. We have people who are assigned on picking these samples up, even if it's at 2 in the morning. We get heart transplants patients at 2 in the morning. And I can tell you sometimes I even stay at till 2 to pick up a sample because if my fellow is busy. So we do have this really nice linear, seamless transaction with the clinic happening all the time.
Thank you.
So for the benefit of our young students, Doctor, a lab is basically where what you see, what you can imagine, right, with beakers and instruments, and a clinic is where there are patients. Is that right?
That is correct. So
Okay.
a lab, let me put it this way. Don't think about a lab which was how a mad scientist is running a lab with those things. Things have changed. I mean, we do need beakers, no question about it. But we have so much sophisticated, we have robotics in it. We have things where you can, at a push of a button, make things happen. We have microscopes, which lenses are like what you see it in the satellite, because you want to look deeper into the cell. You can imagine these are expensive equipment. Each of the equipment could cost 250K. So yes, a lab is exactly like that. You have a bench, you have equipment, beakers, people in lab coats trying to pipette something, pick up something, add something. Absolutely. And a clinic is where you will have this same doctor in a lab coat with a stethoscope who's going to come ask a few questions, say, yeah, you know what, I'm going to prescribe you a drug. See you later. That's exactly how it would be.
Thank you. Hassan, you have a question?
Yes, I have three questions. My first question is, what did you do for pre-med?
What did I do? Like, can you be more specific?
Like for your pre-med major, your bachelor's degree, what did you do?
Well, you have to pick a pre-med. You could do biochemistry. You could pick biology. I have had friends who have done business in their bachelor's degree and then decided to pursue a medical degree. So uh, you could pick neurosciences is one, biochemistry is one. You could pick any of these as your pre-med topic, which will allow you to go into finish your MCATs and go into medical school.
Yeah, but for you, which one did you choose?
I chose biochemistry, what I wanted to do, because that's something that I was really interested in. Remember, biochemistry is all about molecules and chemistry. That's what all we are. We are chemists, right? Our body is all nothing but chemistry.
Thank you. My second question is, which diagnostic tests do you perform to learn more about a patient's heart and cardiovascular conditions?
Okay. So in the clinic, diagnostically, what we do is we will measure there's something called as 2D echo, where we can do by imaging see whether how the heart is functioning. Now, the heart has four chambers, blood comes in, blood goes out. We need to make sure that the blood is pumping accurately to see whether uh, enough blood can be pushed out. So we have imaging technologies. We have, uh, if that is not the case, we can then insert cameras into the body to look at these valvular movements. That's in the clinic usually. We do EKGs, non-invasive technologies, blood tests, which will tell us what are some of the heart markers which are needed. But in the lab, we can do the same thing, but in a two-dimensional level where that same patient's cells can be put in a dish and we can do imaging. We can measure its movement, something which is called as contractility. We can do with microscopes. So these are the basic bread and butter technology diagnostics, which we do both in the clinic and the research lab.
Thank you. My last question is, what are the biggest challenges you're currently facing with your research?
Good, very good question. Yes. Uh, I mean, immediately I can tell you COVID was one of our biggest drawbacks because we had to shut down our lab completely during the quarantine time. And that's a major impact on research. Remember, research is not a sprint, it is a marathon. So you need to think for the long haul. And if you shut down the lab for 2 or 3 months, it would take another 2 to 3 months to get it started again, because all of these things need time. You need to have uh, effects of molecules, drugs, and chemicals takes time to study. So that was one of the immediate things which we face. A bigger aspect what anyone in this field is thinking about is funding. Remember, we need to think about getting an independent, fully funded lab within a big institute like Stanford, because their expectation, or any big institute, is that you will be able to pull in money from these federal funded institutes where I can support my own research. I just mentioned some of these equipments are expensive. I mean, I'm talking 250, 350K equipment. Now, Stanford will give you certain seed money to start your lab, but the expectation is that I want to pull in money, I can buy these equipment on my own to conduct. So that's a long term uh, kind of, I wouldn't say a drawback, but a competitive edge that we need to develop, that we need to continuously be applying for competitive grants from different agencies to support our money. Foundations. I mean, Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, they give us money too. So you need to be on top of these things. And for that, you do need this grit, this discipline where you can keep this full cycle of clinic and research running.
Thank you so much.
Absolutely. I think you're mute, brothers, or you mute.
Oh, sorry about that. We had one
No.
more question. How far are we from becoming cyborgs?
No. We're not. So what you see it in movies of that is, I mean, cyborgs are not going to happen. But you can imagine that the amount of technology which we are implementing in the human body per se, clinically, but also to understand is unbelievable. As I said, 50% of my work now is computational because I can look at the genetic code of an individual, run genomics on it, and predict. I work on stem cells as well, and we can predict long term that what kind of illnesses we can get or are prone to develop. So no, we're not going to get cyborg ever, but we do need those technologies.
So that begs the question, the follow-up question, like what are the ethical dilemmas you guys face? Because if you can predict disease, then can parents abort children if they think they'll have a certain disease?
Absolutely. So this is always this balance we need to run, is that we don't want to play God, or we don't want to give any ideas that we can influence certain decisions by parents or something. But you know there's always a dilemma which is going on, and for this I've always spoken to our religious leaders to get input from it. But our goal always is, and this is what our religious leaders always say, is that our goal is to find there is nothing more than life. Our first thing is to preserve life, and that's the goal of it. But it's better to also understand that what kind of complications we can foresee ahead of time, because it gives us the tools to kind of uh, you know tackle it as we go along. So there is always this ethical dilemma running into that. If I can predict, and if I tell certain individuals that this is what it could be, but I do feel the positive side is that if I tell a certain family that there is a chance that your kid is going to develop Down syndrome or etc., I think it will give them the idea of this choice of trying to correct it, trying to figure out. I mean, we are coming into the school technology with CRISPR IVF, that we can predict which embryo could it be, rather than this not knowing what's going to happen. But of course, there's always this thin balance we have to maintain when it comes to these questions.
Thank you, Doctor. We have another question from Hassan Heather. Go ahead, Hassan.
How will your research affect the future of heart disease?
It's already affecting quite a bit for heart disease. Think about 10 years from now, we could not tell we could not even tell, or 20 years from now, we could not even tell that someone has died because of a mutation in the heart. Now we can not only detect the mutation in the heart, but we can also predict his next generation early on, what they might develop. We can be so precise, we can even tell that you might be totally okay for 30 years of your early life, but by the time you hit the certain age, you're going to start developing heart disease. So maybe lead a healthy life, or eat healthy, or take certain precautions. So research, I mean, my specific research, uh, it's hard to say. I mean, to be modest here, I really don't know. I'm trying to do the best I can. But overall, in general, medical research is key for drug discovery. I mean, this COVID vaccine wouldn't be possible if it wasn't for the cutting edge research which were done in labs. Now, the pharmaceutical labs, of course, ran it because they had the money, but this mRNA technology was not discovered in a pharmaceutical. It was discovered in an academic research lab. So you can think about how long term these implications are, where a discovery 15 years ago about this mRNA technology is giving COVID vaccine now 15 years from now. So the impact is there. It's just how, when it will occur.
Thank you so much.
We have a question from Hussein. Go ahead, Hussein.
Yeah, thank you. So I had a question just about like, have you experienced any like politics or like bureaucracy in medical academia? And if so, like, how do you like navigate that?
Well, there's always going to be politics, Hussein. There is no way around um, to deal with it. So remember, any field, and I can tell you, and I'll be very candid here because I really want you to, all of you guys, to know how to deal with this. Research is highly political as well because we are competing for a certain discovery. The goal of academia is to publish papers into big journals like Nature or Science. And as far as we know, when I'm talking 100 years from now, all researchers were always competitive, trying to deal with politics because then only a discovery gets the certain aspect. So, how do I deal with politics? Hard work is one thing which I can tell you always pays long term. So, there is no good way to deal with politics. You do need to be political, you do need to be street smart because that's how it would lead you to where you are in. But at the same time, you need to have substance behind. So, the way to deal with, we try to work harder because then you have that edge of having additional stuff than the other person. Um, I think being creative helps you have a little bit on edge on the other labs because we are competing, right? We're trying to compete for the same disease. Maybe this unique idea comes to another lab. I want to publish first. Now, these publishing journals are also political because they want to publish so that they can make more money. So you need to be playing that politics as well, trying to apply for funding because so indeed you have to deal with it. But I'll tell you one, I follow this certainly is you try to work harder so that you can compensate for the that political aspect where you have lost, when you're not able to leverage it. So try to work harder.
Okay, thank you.
Mhm.
So I know we're coming up on time, or actually over time. So any last questions for Dr. Nazish? Oh, there's one question that I've forgotten to ask. So what role does government play in medical research, or is it all private, led by private institutions?
Not at all. The government plays 100% influence on what we do. Remember, pharmaceutical companies, private funding only comes in when the product is made. That's when they usually come in and try to grasp that. If it was not from the United States government funding, none of these labs will survive. None of medical research in the United States will survive. Our bread and butter money comes from the National Institutes of Health, which is a government run agency in Maryland, Baltimore. That's where the money comes from. Usually, the Congress decides how much money they want to allocate to every institute. So just briefly, this is led by the National Institutes of Health. That has been divided into certain agencies. One agency is for the heart and the lung, one agency is for the brain, one is for cancer. They are given money. That money is then being distributed to competitive grants, which we apply. It's a panel which reviews it, and that money comes in. So if it, the reason medical research is so top notch in the United States is because of this United States government. These products are run by them, and then the pharmaceutical companies pick it up because they have the resources and money to push this billions of dollars to get a final drug which comes out. So, yes, the government is key to this.
And there was another question. Um, why is the COVID vaccine so controversial? Like, why do people say it hasn't been tested? If you say that, mRNA has been around for, was discovered 10 plus years ago, like, why do people don't have faith in it?
So it's been, let me tell you, it's been controversial because it was made controversial politically, right? So that was the whole idea that why mRNA has been around for a long time. I mean, RNA is three different types: mRNA, tRNA. mRNA is your messenger RNA, and that messenger RNA is always in every cell. Now, the reason it became controversial, or I wouldn't say controversial, we were able to get that vaccine so quickly. Usually, it takes years to develop a vaccine because the idea is that we used to take the live virus, we put it in a animal model, get the antibodies, and then that's the whole thing. But now with this technology where you can take the messenger, not the live virus, but a small section of its messenger, where that is virus is using the mRNA to pass the message on to the next virus, to the next virus. And if you can take that and leverage it to produce a vaccine, this is the reason it became so quick. Now, if you tell me, is it a safe vaccine? I would say absolutely, it is a very safe vaccine. It has been controversial because of what the political environment was last year. But I would tell you, moving forward, most of the vaccines are going to be based on mRNA based vaccines because it's much faster, it's more leaner, it is much more uh, economical. To running 4 to 5 years takes money. The technology is really good. It's just that mRNA was there, but how to implement that mRNA to make a vaccine has been, it takes years to develop certain technology to get there. So I really don't think, if it wasn't an election year, it wouldn't be controversial.
Thank you, appreciate that. And one more question about the careers. So you mentioned government plays a big role in research. So the question was, if somebody wants to work in the government, what are the agencies that they should look for careers in? Like, is it NIH or like CDC? Is CDC part of NIH, or are there other agencies?
Or the absolute very, so I forgot to say about the fourth aspect, right? You do your MD, PhD, or even MD, or even PhD, you can think about academic institutes, pharmaceutical industry, or you could think about just clinics. The fourth aspect is working for the government. NIH recruits thousands of people from this background because they need individuals to run policy. And not just government, even pharmaceutical companies need policy making because guidance is needed. We need policy making. These are jobs are very cushy jobs. NIH recruits thousands of individuals who have the medical background because they need policy making. They need administrative individuals who actually can then pass on that information to people like me. So when I submit my grants, they don't end up onto the table of someone who doesn't have the expertise. It ends up on a table of an individual who has MD, PhD, or MD or a PhD degree because he can relate to us. So NIH, CDC, FDA, these are all agencies which are constantly looking for uh, people who are from a background, who have medical background, because they want them to be helping with the administration, the policy making. They're much more relaxed job because it's not a competitive. You are much more uh, uh, goal oriented, where we need to do this and implement this. Remember, those people make the policy what we have to follow. So these are hard jobs to do, but they're much more relaxed because you have a fixed salary, they pay you well. There are a lot of perks working for the government, benefits. These are amazing things. So absolutely, always think about that. The United States government are looking for people who have this medical background.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Dr. Nazish. I think we're out of time. We're actually over time because of the questions. So we want to thank you again for taking time out of your busy schedule to talk to our youth. I hope that everybody found this useful. We'll make the recording available on our YouTube channel. Any last comments, thoughts, Doctor?
No, I'm good. I'm so glad that Brother Azhar, you are running these. This is very important for our youth to kind of know. I can only tell you that when I was trying to figure out my career path, I didn't have this platform where I could, usually it was a trial and error talking to people, but we should have these kind of platforms available for our youth because it's our responsibility to provide them with this. Makes the decision making easy for them and their family. So I would say keep up this, Brother Azhar, and inshallah, if anyone, you guys need me back, I would be very happy to come back for the Shine Labs to answer any questions.
Thank you. And Doctor, your email, if you'd like to share, just put it in the chat.
I'll give my email address.
Yes.
My Gmail address, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Because Stanford might get inundated with a lot of emails. So I'm going to give you this, my personal email. Yeah. So if you do have a questions, please reach out.
Awesome. Thank you again. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Doctor.
Thank you.
Thank you. Assalamu alaikum.
Assalamu alaikum.
Khuda Hafiz.